and welcome. Today we are back demystifying, decoding an application of a very successful student. So thank you for joining, Tanisha. This is an absolute pleasure to connect with you while you're almost ending your exam week at USC and getting ready to maybe come back home for summer. So today's session is going to be unique. Why don't you quickly introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Tanisha. I'm a freshman at USC. I'm currently a global geodesign major, and I'm hoping to add on a business degree from the Marshall School of Business, and I'm from Bombay.
Okay, great. Here you go. Okay, so I'm just starting off with the education section, but prior to that, there's this family information, demographic information, which I guess everyone can fill up. So we'll get to the meat of things. In the education section of the Common App, it's also pretty straightforward. You do mention your school or schools that you've been in high school through ninth grade and additional summer school programs or 4 credit courses that you've done in pre-college settings. In your case, this Oberlin program. What was it about? What did you study at Oberlin online?
So
Or
this,
was it part of the Pioneer program? Was this what it is?
yeah, this was the Pioneer program, and I was a part of the social psychology cohort. So that's the direction in which I did my research.
Okay, great. And what was the topic of your research? It'll be interesting to share with viewers.
So the topic of my research was the impact of individualism versus collectivism, which is essentially like this metric of cultural difference on reciprocity.
Okay, and so where does this fall under? Sociology, psychology, and what is the motivation to do it?
So it falls under the domain of social psychology and economics.
Mhm.
And my main motivation for doing it was noticing that there was a big difference in the North Indian culture and the South Indian culture. Like I would often notice that whenever we would send over sweets to like my North Indian friends' houses, they would send the box back with sweets. But to a lot, in the case of a lot of South Indian households, they would sometimes send food, sometimes not send food. And I noticed that this cultural difference was there, and I tried to explore it further and correlate it to individualism versus collectivism.
Interesting. So definitely seeing how communities are built and how the small nuances of reciprocity between individuals in those cultures extends. Great. So very often in the education section, students are confused. How do we represent our IB courses or students with the Indian curriculum? How do we put those? But it's pretty straightforward. It's on the Common App. You choose your curriculum and you can code it and word it correctly. In your case, it was pretty clear that you 3 HLs and 3 standard level courses at the IB BP program. You listed those, but you also listed your extended essay and the area of knowledge sort of, which definitely is on the transcript. So anything that goes on the transcript should go here. Anything confusing about this? Did you find it that, okay, should I put it this way or that way, or it was pretty straightforward for you?
I think I was confused about what domain I should put the extended essay under. And then I was able to navigate that economics would fall under the history category, because I think with a lot of subjects like economics, for instance, isn't one of those subjects that's very popular for American kids to study in high school. So you sort of need to figure out what category it would fall into your.
Sure. So you mean there weren't many options for social sciences, and there was history which you had to pick for the IB. Okay. Moving forward, there's a section where you can list your academic honors and achievements. And very often students say, oh, look, our school doesn't, we know that we are in our top 5 percentile of our class, but our school doesn't recognize any of that. So it's hard for them to mention it directly because these have to be earned and stated. So in your school, in your case, you had some of these. So that's pretty straightforward. But then students do things beyond school as well. They go at the regional level for Olympiads, national level, international level. They also participate in other competitions. Very often I see profiles of tech students who've done science fairs, who then got awarded at the national level and represented the country at another science fair, and so on and so forth. So there are opportunities, or even hackathons they win at an international level. So do you want to say something about the school award section? How did it make a difference? And if you have friends who at your own school, but there was something beyond schoolwork that you felt people should know and some opportunities you feel were interesting in your field?
So for me, my honors section was pretty straightforward because it was all school-related activities. But a lot of my friends took part in robotics competitions and did a lot of science fair related activities. So from what I've noticed after looking at other people's common apps, they've put a lot of activities which have received recognition at a very high level in the honors section.
Great. I like that undecided comma business, but I think you're itching more towards business eventually, so that's a good sign. Following your journey at USC and the previous podcast we just recorded, we talked about your interests in studying at USC. Okay. TOEFL, straightforward. Very often students say, oh, look, our means of instruction or language of instruction has been English through kindergarten or even pre-K. And our answer is, if you're good at it, why not, prove it? And TOEFL is an avenue which could be really easy for you to do that. And in your case, it really did work out. These are really high scores for different sections of the test. Any other advice? Did anyone care at USC whether you had done the TOEFL or not?
Honestly, I'd say over here it's pretty discriminatory in terms of English proficiency. Like as an international student, despite you getting a good score on the TOEFL or the IELTS or on IB or on an AP exam, they don't let you volunteer as an English tutor just because you're not considered to be a native speaker being from India. Whereas if you have like an Australian passport or a Canadian passport or a British passport, you're recognized to be like a proficient first language speaker.
Okay, so fine. This score doesn't really get
Yeah.
you the opportunities in school once you join. Great, but my advice again for international students, just do the TOEFL or the IELTS. It's really simple. If you've been in a international school setting or even in a school where language of instruction and even informal language is English, you'll be all set.
And I think it does help with the visa process because it helps them like filter out a lot of students, and you can always just add it onto your LinkedIn.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There was a time when TOEFL also had the scholarship, but
Yeah.
this is the activities page, and I think students spend hours, weeks, months sort of crafting it. And a few don't actually put whatever they want, what comes to their mind in whatever order they wish. And it does show. It does show the time that you spend putting in things, listing these activities is important. There's space for 10 activities.
Yeah.
And students not necessarily have to fill in all 10. But I think if there was space for 20, Tanisha, you would fill out all 20. So, but no, maybe I'm wrong. So how did you go about the activities section, and how did you prioritize what comes first and second? What were you torn between choosing this activity? So I'm going to zoom out a little bit to make this page smaller.
I definitely think filling out my UC activity section turned out to be much easier for me just because they give you many more slots to add activities. What I had to do is combine a lot of different activities that I've done. So if you scroll down, there's a section related to theater and public speaking, where I've combined being an actor, dancer, choreographer for several different productions in my school, apart from doing a play with this human rights activist Parna Mukherjee. So I try to look for larger themes and categorize my activities based on which theme it fit into. And even in terms of my order, I try to divide it in that sense. For example, my first activity was the pioneer research paper that I did, but then I followed that up with another pioneer related activity that I've done. So I try to maintain a little bit of consistency in terms of not jumping around too much.
Excellent. So there was research, again, maybe highlighting that you are applying to a academic institution, so showcasing the quality of your work outside of school, which adds to the depth in your approach to academics. And doing a research program like the Pioneer does definitely highlight that. And you did, I noticed that in your additional information section later on, mentioned the abstract, which is really useful for admissions officers to note. They will not have the time to go over the sample that you submit. Very often students say, oh, should I put this? Should I put that? I say, okay, if it matters to your major, definitely link it up, but don't expect admissions officers to find time to read it. But in your case, it did work out, perhaps beyond the admissions. When the presidential scholarship was offered, I'm sure more people got involved in reading, and the interview that you did for the presidential scholarship also highlights that there was yeah, deep understanding of who you are, where you come from, what your interests are, what your intellectual leanings are, and stuff like that. So great. Community work was the second, and student government politics, which in your knowing you, I felt that you really could have switched places between student government politics and community work. So it's a small difference. So why did you yeah, why did you put this over that? And very briefly tell us about things that you did at student gov politics in school.
I think I always undervalued the things I did in school just because of the fact that I was amongst the only students who was involved in so many different things in school. So it was almost like taken for granted that Tanisha is going to be there doing those things, which is why I decided to decide to put my independent projects above the school related activities. Also because I was under the assumption that they would get to read more about that side of my personality through my letters of recommendation. But the other two activities are something that might get overlooked just because they aren't reflected in as many components of the application.
And what's really cool is you followed the advice that we gave you to the T, and you wanted to mention specifics in each of your activity, raising 50,000, impacting 1,000 whatever odd people, then raise so and so in for specific constituents in rural Maharashtra and for a particular cause like treatment for COVID. So I think this is a very professional and very let's say precisely done resume, which was then translated into the additional information section of the common application. So for students, I always tell them that, okay, work on your resume first, put in all these details, and then you're ready to work on your activity section. Any other tips and points would you like to share about how to craft, these lines and statements in your resume?
So I think it's very important to use verbs to highlight the degree of the activity. For example, choosing when to put organized versus contributed and things like that. So I think the choice of verbs is something that matters a lot. Another thing that I changed from my early application to my regular decisions was the fact that all the numbers which are on my application, I'd converted them to US dollars.
Oh,
So,
good.
for example, there's one fundraiser where the group I was working with raised about 8 lakh rupees. So, right from when I converted that 8 lakh to about 12,000 US dollars at the time, it automatically sounded much more impactful just because, from the perspective of an American person reading it, there's more relatability. So, those are a few minor changes that I made. And I also try to make it more impact centric rather than making it wordy, because I think that directly shows how you as an individual contributed to a particular thing that was going on. So it highlights your value addition as opposed to it just being an activity that you engaged in.
Which was the most difficult activity to squeeze in the activity section, and then also subsequently explain it in the additional information section for you?
I think it was the theater and drama section, because for the Converse play, I did a lot of different things. And I feel like just because of my struggle to articulate the work that I'd done for them, it didn't come off as strongly as I would have liked it to.
Great, thanks for sharing. And I think I've already scrolled through the theater section and we went through it. The next section we want to focus on is the personal statement. Personal essays are always confusing to students thinking of sharing something interesting about their story, and it's hard for them to zero in on a topic or even themes that they feel are worthy of being admitted to a college. Very often we have this heart-to-heart conversation with students and say, hey, look, the personal essay is more to do with you as an individual, a human being. It also replaces a very informal, maybe sitting with an admissions officer who would like to know some aspects about your life over a coffee meet. So approaching the personal essay requires a different mindset, a different mood by which you look at your life and work towards penning those thoughts. Journaling obviously helps, and then showing what you're thinking and zeroing in on a particular theme and sticking to it till you feel it can be crafted into a final essay works beautifully. So here are a few tips that I've sort of wanted to share, but I also wanted to hear from you, Tanisha. How did you work on this process? And I know the hours we spent and you came over to the office and we had so many ideas, but finally, what was your story all about?
So the version of the essay you can see on your screen right now is something that I started working on exactly 9 days before the early action deadline. I'd written like 17 or 18 drafts of my Common App essay, each with the different topics. Some were about um, activities I did in school, my mom's journey with cancer, what I learned from that, public speaking and overcoming social anxiety, things like that, until I was going through my Google Doc archives and I found an activity essay that I'd worked on with your team back in the 10th grade. And that seemed like something which had interesting pieces that I could use. And that's how I came to talking about this. I think something that I struggled with, and I've seen a lot of juniors of mine struggle with as they're going through the college application process now, is just highlighting a part of themselves which is very unique to their individual experience. It could be something as small as a thought in your mind, to a book or a quote that you read, to a conversation that you had with a person. My Common App essay ended up being about a conversation I had with my grandfather that stemmed from this jigsaw puzzle that he gifted me on my birthday. And I talked about how I really enjoyed making that jigsaw puzzle and learning about the world map. And then I linked that back to his story of migration from um, Karachi to Bombay. So I think an overlooked perspective when it comes to writing the personal essay is the fact that people try to talk about stories which are overdone. Like, I think most people have a story about the death of a grandparent. Most people have a story about becoming more extroverted, trying a new hobby, whether it be dance or music. And some people do a really good job of writing those essays. But if that's a narrative that you don't think is working for you, you can start from something as small as the things that I previously mentioned, because the idea should be to be able to demonstrate that curiosity that you have about a certain concept. Like, they really want to know what a conversation with you would look like, what are the thoughts in your mind, how do you build arguments using those thoughts, and once those thoughts come to you, what do you do with them? Do you ponder over them a little more? Does that make you have a conversation with someone? Does that make you want to start a project? Everything doesn't necessarily need to be very outcome centric. Like, I tried writing a lot of essays about the nonprofit that I founded or a particular fundraiser that I organized, but I eventually ended up writing an essay about something which was very distinct from any of the activities that I did, which were mentioned on my Common App.
Thank you so much, Tanisha. This has been a very revealing sort of session. I think many of our viewers would want to look up your sort of articulation and understand your articulation of the Common App that we just browsed over. So thanks again, and look forward to seeing you soon in India.